Oh man, I really had to get myself psyched up to get this one recorded. So, are you ready? Let's go. People who once lacked motivation but are now successful? What changed? Story 1. I was a terrible student, seventh grader, when it all started to go downhill. And then by my second semester, senior year of high school, I went into the final of the one class I needed to pass in order to graduate, needing a 160% in the final in order to pass. Thanks to the teacher being far kinder than I ever deserved, I graduated in time. I was a horrible student who lacked motivation, and more importantly, discipline when I finished high school in 2017. I decided not to go to college yet. I took some time off from school and sold my soul to the work of retail for about a year and a half. See, when I was 13 years old, I read about a guy who had loaded some camping gear onto the back of his bicycle and for a year and a half went biking from northern Alaska to the southern tip of South America. When I read about that guy, I already loved biking and camping, so I developed a bit of an obsession for bicycle touring. The summer when I was 16, I did my first bike camping trip, camping for the night and biking home the next day. It was a ton of fun, and so the next summer I moved up to a 4-day, 200-mile bike camping trip. I decided if I wanted to do some big crazy trip like that one that first inspired me, the best time to do it would be before I get stuck with a bunch of college debt. After I graduated, I did another big bike trip, spending 20 days riding almost 1,300 miles from my home in south central Wisconsin clockwise around Lake Michigan. I got back from that trip with $2 and change to my name, so I got to work saving up for my big cross-country bike adventure. Last August, I decided I finally had enough savings to go for it, so I quit my job, and on August 17th, I left my home in Wisconsin with the goal of riding to Seattle and down the Pacific coast. Right around Thanksgiving, I got to Eugene, Oregon, so I rented a storage unit there and left the bike in it while I flew home for the holidays. When I came back to Oregon shortly after New Year's, I found it to be too cold and rainy in the Pacific Northwest for what I was doing, so I hopped on an Amtrak from Eugene to Monterey, California, about 100 miles south of the Bay Area. I biked from there to San Diego, then turned east into Arizona. I was in Sedona when the coronavirus started to get really serious in mid-March, so I ended my trip a couple months early by biking up to Flagstaff and getting on a train back home. Since then, I've gone back to work. I was planning to go to college starting this fall, so that might get pushed back another year. Here's the point, though. I think we all have big, crazy dreams, like riding a bicycle across an entire country. We all fantasize about what we'd do if we won the lottery and never had to work again. But it takes a really special type of person to look at a dream like biking across a country. We just get in our own way by convincing ourselves it's impossible. I realized I have an incredible gift because I don't stand in my own way, but I let myself waste that gift for far too long. Never again. I've been feeling a bit lost in life since I got home. This was something I dreamed of since I was 13 years old, and now, at 21, it's finally done. I dreamed of doing this for more than a third of my life, and 3 years ago, it completely took over my life. So once you've accomplished your greatest goals in life, where do you go from there? How do you find the drive to dream even bigger and then push yourself to pursue that next big thing? This is something I've been struggling with a lot lately, but I'm sure that with a bit more time, I'll answer these questions. And once I do, when I find my next crazy dream, I won't let myself waste my drive to pursue it. Too long didn't read? I dreamed of something that I wanted badly enough to do whatever it took to get there. Once I accomplished that dream, I realized I had an incredible gift in that I took a dream many people would call crazy or even impossible, and I made it a reality. Although I don't yet know what my next big crazy idea will be, I won't waste that gift for so long before I start working towards the next chapter of my life. That's a great first story to start out with. I've biked for quite a while, but I've never done something that big. There must be a big exhilaration in finding you've accomplished something you've set out to do. In this case, it's a mental as well as a physical exhilaration. It's interesting that he also realizes that that motivation could go away if he doesn't keep it up. What do you think his next big goal is going to be? Story 2. I quit. When my high school counselor told me to quit, I cried, I felt lost, I felt alone. I was always told I'd never make it to college. We were too poor. Loans were something rich people could get. Nobody told me any different. Why waste my time with school? I started working full time, and I was the best employee when I showed up. It was a theme that began a journey of quitting. It was a long journey with a lot of obstacles. Wasted time, parties and clubs, bars and late nights. I met a girl, though. She pushed me to try. I quit my job for a new one with an apprenticeship. I had a reason to show up. It was something I was genuinely interested in. I quit calling in sick. I quit going to bars and clubs. I quit drinking. I quit smoking. There were a lot of positive influences. People. Those were the highlights. Positive people that inspired me, pushed me harder, and asked more of me than anyone else ever had. I learned what humility was. I quit trying to prove myself. I quit trying to succeed. I quit trying to be the best. I quit feeling failure. I started just looking out for others. I quit worrying about what others thought about me and started worrying about how to help others. My life took a turn for the better. I had mentors at work and a family of my own, a wife and a young daughter. I volunteered teaching school children about science, technology, engineering, and math. I went back to school, to college. I dropped out of high school with over a year's worth of credits from advanced placement courses. My apprenticeship gave me another year of credit and an associate's. I earned an accelerated bachelor's program that had 16 hours of class every weekend for a year. 11 years after dropping out of high school, I graduated with my bachelor's. 13 years afterwards, I graduated with my master's. 16 years later, I'm now halfway through my PhD. I'm on the executive board of 2 nonprofits. I'm a senior civilian in the U.S. Navy with a decade of service and the CEO of my own consulting firm. What changed? I did. I quit being the kid who was told they'd never have a chance. I started being the man who gave others the opportunity they deserve. I found my passion. My pursuit is giving others the chance to learn and grow, showing them they have a choice. I had to stop for a moment and reflect on that story. That one's really deep. It took one person that really believed in him that showed him what his passion was. People think there's a saying in the Bible that says God helps those that helps themselves. That's not actually in the Bible. However, this person really personifies that statement more than anything. Story 3. I moved upstate where a lot of my friends had been accepted to college. But I didn't have a lot of money. I lived with one of them who had just got a place, but his girlfriend started hanging out since they had privacy. 2 weeks later, my stuff was by the door. So I got the paper and looked at rentals. This was a while ago. And the only room I could find that was cheap was in that house. You know it. That house in the neighborhood with the broken porch and 3 cars out front that don't work. And while it had H-addicts coming and going, the more I stayed there and the more I saw how they lived, the more I wanted better. I was also working in a coffee shop as a waiter with people that had been working there for years or even decades. One day during late summer, I was heading out to work and one of the addicts had passed out with a needle still kind of stuck in his arm. One of the 6 dogs that lived there was licking it. I stood and stared. This was before the morning shift. That afternoon, after work, I went straight to the JC and registered. I worked hard and never ever flagged. All I had to do was think of those days at that house. And here is where negative reinforcement comes in, whereas the last story was positive reinforcement. Sometimes there are experiences that are just that bad. I've had experiences like that. I did stay at a place where I'm glad that I'm in a position that I don't have to stay in a place like that again. I can understand this person's motivation. I can find motivation in that I never want to be in a place like I was ever again. Story 4. Nearly went blind due to a severe case of treatment-resistant pigmentary glaucoma, which ultimately required 3 surgeries to correct in my early to mid-20s. I'm an American millennial. Had not been on my parents' insurance, the whole fiasco likely would have set me up for a lifetime of debt, or I just would have gone blind. At the time, we still weren't really sure if I was going to need additional surgeries in a few years. After the age of 26, when I would have automatically been booted off my parents' insurance. Got my butt in gear to get a career that would reliably offer health insurance or pay well enough that I could buy my own private plan. I feel I was lucky. First off, because I had parents in a position to still have me on their insurance. But also, most people don't have their first major health crisis until later in life, when it's harder to change the course of their finances or career. I see this playing out in many of my friends. I am nevertheless in favor of socialized healthcare. I don't want other people to go through the terror that I did, and many go through far worse. Story 5. For what it's worth, terms like motivation and discipline are so broad to be fairly useless. That's just a huge rock to lift. But if you can break them down into more specific skills, changing your behavior might be easier. For example, if I think of myself as unmotivated to finish this painting project, it can be really difficult to summon the energy to work on it. But if I narrow my issue down to the difficulty I'm having in initiating the painting process, the barrier becomes so much easier to overcome. I know that once I get started, I'll probably get into and really get some painting done. Or maybe I'm reluctant to work on it because there are a lot of steps involved and I feel a little overwhelmed. But maybe I could work on just one part of it that feels manageable. And tomorrow, the whole process will feel a lot less intimidating. Just keep chipping away at it. Anyway, point being, motivation is really an umbrella term for a whole suite of traits: organization, planning, task initiation, follow through, etc. Most people have a few strong suits and a couple weaknesses, but being specific about your obstacles can make them so much easier to manage. Story 6. As someone who recently got out of a 7-year funk, here's a big thing I've learned. People are like cars. They need fuel, not just food, but also other needs like emotional support. As we go through life, we basically are running on fumes because our parents/teachers/friends tell us we're not good enough and not deserving of emotional resources. But if we can recognize that we have needs that aren't being met, we can find ways to get those needs met. And once that emotional hunger has been sated and our tank is full, motivation comes with it. For me, I found that there were some needs I had buried deep. Uncovering them and addressing them has totally changed my life. It's only been a few days that I've been like this, and I'll probably have another slump in the future, but this was a big breakthrough for me. Is it just me, or do you feel like you just stepped out of a motivational seminar listening to that one? It was some very good insight. It seems kind of simple, but I kind of agree with it. I think that one just boils down to before we can figure out what we want, we need to figure out what we need. And that makes sense. Story 7. Something just clicked. I weighed 190 pounds. I wasn't going anywhere in my career, and I was just overall unhealthy with my anger. For me, honesty is the best motivator. When I'm honest with myself and embrace the truth, nothing anyone else can say bothers me anymore. It sounds like shaming, but I would say out loud at work when there were cookies offered, "I can't. I'm fat." This made a lot of coworkers surprised and worried at first. Some of them laughed at the randomness of it, but it worked for me. And sometimes made the awkward, "Oh, I can't have that. One cookie won't hurt," etc. just disappear. I have now lost 60 pounds. I took a lot of leadership courses and sought opportunities from upper management and am now in a temporary management position. And I'm healthy. Story 8. I had a woman I was really into get into a huge blowout fight with me. I was working as a bartender and event staff at a winery part-time and saving all my money so I could buy a motorcycle. The gist of her argument was that I wasn't a real man and she could never love a man-child. I got mad. Loved my job at the winery, but I needed to make more cash and have an interesting job that sounded really awesome and spicy. Thinking, "I'll show you, shrew. I'll be the most manly man you ever met." So, went to trade school, graduated 3.8 with 2 majors in aviation. Yeah, suck on that. Was financially independent as a bachelor till COVID hit. I never saw her after coming back home, but she was the most important woman in my life, like out of spite. Aside from graduating with a degree in aviation, this sounds like a supervillain origin story. So we've had positive reinforcement, then we had negative reinforcement, now we have just pure hate. It's kind of funny. Can you just imagine him grinding his teeth while studying every night and writing notes by lamp? Having this wild look in his eyes while taking every test? "I'll show you, I'll show you." Story 9. My mental health. I was severely depressed throughout primary school and most of college. Graduated high school with a 2.5 GPA and then nearly failed out of college twice. When I could find any motivation at all, I performed well. but most of the time I was self-unaliving and just couldn't make myself care about anything. I was finally allowed to see a therapist starting around 20 years old, and by my 5th year of college, I'd become a 4.0 student. Went into a very competitive graduate school a few years later and graduated top of my class while being the only student working full-time. I've excelled and been promoted in every job I've had since then. Story 10. I was a 5'6", 210-pound incoming freshman who had always got below average grades. I played football, but my football team had a loser mentality. I joined wrestling, and there I met the best community I've ever been in. There I realized my purpose as a person, of being someone who gives themselves for a greater good for what they care about. I'm now 5 feet 9 to 10 and 180 pounds, while doing better in school. I'm now starting in football and wrestling is coming together well. Too long didn't read? Find your purpose and give it all for said purpose.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. I was dating a girl. She was the most beautiful angel that ever walked this planet. She was kind and generous, and she loved me. Then she broke up with me and I was crushed. I took a look back at every argument that we had ever had, and they all boiled down to money. My value as a person is directly related to my bank account. I want to have the opportunity to make her value me again. So I put in the work, found a better job, kissed butt, worked hard, started early, and stayed late. I began teaching myself new skills that I can monetize. Now in another year or two, I will be completely debt-free. I have all my bills caught up. I have my car paid off. I don't know if she'll ever love me again, but at least now I'm a better person. Money changes everything. Actually, I don't think that's the issue here. It's easy to look at this story and think, oh, I guess just be rich and stop being poor. If you look at the story, I think it shows that he learned a lot of new skills. Things like organizing and getting yourself in order with your debts. Maybe learning how to budget. Maybe learning to live within your means. I think in that way, he's a better person. It's not that he has money now. Story 12. Someone I greatly admire once said, "Motivation doesn't factor much into my life. Motivation comes and goes. If you lived by motivation, you would accomplish little, or you would accomplish a wave every now and again. My life is run by discipline, even when it's hard, even when it's easy. I dedicate myself to discipline. Don't chase the little gremlin that is motivation. It runs too fast. Slowly climb the mountain that is discipline. You owe it to yourself." I seriously attribute my success to that mindset. Story 13. I'll give you the opposite. 20 years of motivation and success, followed by 10 of zero motivation and little success, as defined by society, that is. The big difference and turning point was life happened, innocence was lost, I learned what the game is, and I realized I didn't want to play. Just wasn't worth it. While I'm technically sad for what I've lost, I'm definitely happier to have spent my time as I've spent it the last 10 years. No use playing in a rigged system. No use playing in a rich system. I'd rather do the bare minimums and enjoy my limited time/one life. Story 14. Motivation finds you is actually the last thing that finds you, unless you already have it. Been through a downward spiral, incurred loss after loss, topped with an irrevocable loss, not financial. Thought I'd hit rock bottom on several occasions. Yet, lastly found out that rock bottom has a basement. When you literally have nothing left, you flip a coin to see whether you're throwing the towel in or climbing out of the muck hole you find yourself in. This is when motivation shows up to stay. That story goes hand in hand with the previous one. I like that idea that you have. We're not looking at motivation so much as discipline. I find myself doing that too. Got a lot of jobs to do, and I really have to choose to start them. Once I start, I know I'm good to go. Story 15. You realize that accepting responsibility also empowers you to be able to make changes for your own self. For example, if you're fat, if you go, "Oh well, I have fat people genes," and sit down with a 2-liter of Pepsi, well, that's pretty lazy and depressing. But if you go, "Well, I'm fat, and I know if I work my butt off, I can torch the muck out of my fat and slim down," It empowers you to know you're able to make the changes you want to see and don't have to blame it on others. Story 16. A couple years in the Air Force. Working on the flight line will either make you or break you. I learned hard work and the meaning of it. Got out, moved away from everyone I know, and started a new life. I work in banking now, ended up buying a house, and showed the friends I made in the service that they too can make it on their own. As a bonus, my college is free when I want to use it, thanks to the post 9/11 GI Bill. Story 17. When I was 18, I was overweight sitting on my parents' couch watching TV. A friend of my parents offered me a job in real estate development. I started working for about 2 years and saved up enough money to travel around the world. I came back after a year of traveling and now run my own property management company. What changed for me was having a successful family friend. Probably not what you were looking for. Story 18. Got diagnosed with ADHD, got on meds. Went from a 1.8 average to a 3.4 average GPA. Started working a 45 to 50 hour week job and lost 20 pounds. During a freaking pandemic. It's amazing. I always felt somewhere deep within me there was a type A successful and passionate person, and I found her. And I'm keeping her. Only wish I would have done it sooner. I'm sure this is something we should not discount. There are some of us that have some mental issues that we do need meds to help us get through. As long as the meds don't become a crutch, I don't see any problem with this. For a lot of us, we just need the mental discipline to choose where we want to go. I don't know about you, but I do feel fortunate that we are in a society where people that have mental issues like ADHD and others can get the help they need. Story 19. Understanding that motivation is fleeting, but discipline makes things happen. Without discipline, the chances of actually completing any task that is ultimately highly rewarding are slim. Establish a goal, something you want. Reverse engineer the steps you need to make that goal come true. Build the discipline to grind it out. Story 20. I got married and realized that if I wanted to be a father, which I always had, I'd better go get a career. The day after our wedding, I told my wife I was going to apply to law school, which I did. And now, 8 years later, I have a great job as an attorney. Last year, we bought a house, and we have 2 kids. My motivation is still based on providing for my family. Story 21. I used to barely pass in high school and did horrible in school. My parents were always there to clean up my messes and brush it under the rug. Once I lived on my own and realized the only person to clean up my mess was me, I started. Now, I'm a straight A honor student. Story 22. This question is backwards for me. It's strange. I used to be so motivated, talented, had tons of money. I was also an H addict. Now that I'm 5 years sober, I've lost all motivation, I'm lazy, poor, and hate working. I guess it was the dope keeping me going. Story 23. I went to the doctor and asked for ADHD meds and boom, where I was once a lazy perfectionist that couldn't get anything done at all, turned into everything makes sense, being able to break up projects into minor tasks that could be accomplished. General happiness skyrocketed. Story 24. I taught high school for half a year, and one of my students was so incredibly smart and pointed out all of my flaws on how to be a better educator. High schoolers have no filter and say whatever is on their mind. And it motivated me to do better and decided to go for my master's. Story 25. I went on a walk to jump off a cliff, and on my way there, the Bob Marley song 3 Little Birds came on, even though it wasn't in the playlist I was listening to, saying, every little thing is going to be all right. And now I look at everything from a positive point of view. Story 26. College. I was so unmotivated and lazy in high school. I still got good grades, but I didn't want to go to school. When I got to college, something just clicked, and I for once actually wanted to learn and try hard. The tuition was also a good motivator. Story 27. Mine is a 2-part answer. First, I found something I actually liked doing and not just something other people wanted me to do. Secondly, I got antidepressants and therapy. Bam! Functional human being. Now I have a bachelor's degree and working on my postgrad. Story 28. I convinced my doctors to let me off medication, and I stopped listening to the people who diagnosed me while I was on that medication. I quit believing I was broken, and I remembered who I knew I factually was and actually am. Story 29. Just realizing that most who are successful aren't better than me. They're just doing whatever it is they're doing, as opposed to my relative inaction. Story 30. Realizing no one else has their muck together either. And if I just show up, I'll be ahead of the pack. Analysis paralysis is a killer.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.